3 months and a ton of issues later, we have finally made our way through Amazing Spider-Man Gang War, the big event that just really encompasses and highlights everything that everyone is upset about when it comes to Marvel Comics and really even DC Comics events. Finally finished this week. And Jim, obviously you're here with me. What are some of your just general takeaways and feelings regarding Gang War as we wrap this bad boy up?
My general feeling, it was a waste of time and money if you got involved, especially if you got involved with the entire thing, which I think is ridiculous.
Absolutely. So let's get into the 5 big takeaways I came away from Spider-Man Gang War. The first one is the most obvious. It is way too big. This thing ended up being 29 issues in total. You only needed 5 or 6 to be completely honest. And of course, it had to be an Amazing Spider-Man and Miles Morales Spider-Man. And we got a jackpot one-shot that's supposed to be part of Gang War. And they kicked off a new Spider-Woman. They call it ongoing, but you know it's going to be a mini-series. And then we had a bunch of tie-in stuff with Luke Cage, Shang-Chi, Not Real Daredevil, and all this kind of stuff. And it basically just was way too bloated, way too enormous, and far too expensive for what you actually got as far as storytelling.
Yeah, and it wasn't just the idea that it was bloated and way too much. It was that none of these things felt very coordinated. When you got into these tie-ins, what you'd have is, oh, there's Spider-Man and She-Hulk saying Gang War, and then leave you with a story that really barely tied into anything. Gang War, it was just, hey, let's get these random characters in random stories and try to figure out something. And that was really exposed by the end when those characters show up at the finale and don't have anything to do of any significance because they never did have anything to do with any significance.
The worst example is Shang-Chi.
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense that he's even in the event. They're calling back the stuff that happened 3 and 4 years ago in a miniseries nobody read. And then when you get to the final issue, he just shows up with fucking Iron Fist. They're like, what have you guys been doing? We were fighting the dragon or something.
I mean, they show up legitimately and say, you left the karate guys fighting tanks. And then they blame She-Hulk. You left and she said, I don't like fighting tanks. The end. That's the only thing that tied into the Shang-Chi and a little bit of the Luke Cage because that's where Danny Rand came, but they had nothing for them to do. They never would. It's ridiculous.
No, and by the end, 29 issues is a lot to get through. Me personally, I only read the main series and a little bit of the Miles Morales stuff. I tried to do the Luke Cage stuff because I like Rodney Barnes. It just wasn't my flavor. It wasn't a really good comic book in my opinion. But I think in a few months, we're going to wish that their next event was this small. Yeah. We've seen the numbers on Blood Hunt. Somehow we've gone to a pointless 29-issue Spider-Man event to a pointless 59-issue, 60-issue Marvel Heroes versus Vampires event. They're not learning the lessons here, even though people have been telling them for a very long time, you've got to scale this back.
Yeah, you have to scale back, and instead of doing that, they up it. And they don't realize that it is a battle of attrition, I guess, with the fans. When you end up going through these events like a Gang War that is only 29 issues and it feels like so much, the next thing, that's way too much. And I think people already have event fatigue, but it's not even just like, hey, the big event. This is event fatigue of these don't matter. And why am I involved? You end up pretty much getting Amazing Spider-Man fans. They're going to have to read Gang War, at least the deal. But when you throw in something like a Vampires versus Marvel deal and go that many issues, that's weird. That's way over the top.
My second big takeaway regarding Spider-Man Gang War, Spider-Man is the ultimate passenger in his own event series. He doesn't really do anything here. I know in the finale, he does mention, you guys have destroyed the city. They forgot to show that part. They forgot to show the part where this big gang war was affecting the day-to-day citizens and their lives in New York City, and Spider-Man had to actually show up. But when he was there, and he certainly was there, he's basically just witnessing the events that are going on. He doesn't really intervene until the very end of the book. At one point, he's just sitting there watching a negotiation between Tombstone and Kingpin and cracking jokes the entire time.
Yeah, and then watching them make out. It seemed they were doing a make-out fight. So when you end up having all that, one of the things that really killed me about it is that if people haven't noticed, people aren't really that into Zeb Wells' Amazing Spider-Man. So you have this thing where, okay, you get a big event here. Maybe it's focused. Maybe you get a lot of other people get involved. And, oh, my God, I got to read this. But no, it just shows you that Zeb Wells doesn't have much of any story to tell. This seems like he was trying to grab into the hype of earlier on issues with Tombstone. But by the end, it wasn't a Spider-Man event. And then overblowing it, it just feels really odd. And yeah, by the end, you have to remind people. I mean, in the last, why is Spider-Man even involved? And it became, it was because Randy Robertson got shot. Most people probably forgot about it. And you said, you never see any outside things of how this is affecting people. The city's on fire, we're told over and over. Never really see in any of it, what that means to each piece. It seems like everybody was going on with their daily lives while this gang war was going on. But in the meantime, Spider-Man teams up with Tombstone and is kind of the vehicle to allow one of the biggest villains he has to take over New York City. I mean, it's his fault by the end.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. It's almost like Zeb Wells went and borrowed a page from Tom King's Batman run, The War of Jokes and Riddles, which was like the first time that I think a lot of Batman fans realized, whoa, I don't think Tom King gets Batman. He wouldn't have actually sided with Joker or the Riddler. In this case. He would have taken them both down, but he showed that he had like weak character and he didn't feel like he could overtake it on his own. And he ends up obviously siding with Riddler or whatever. And to go down that route makes Spider-Man look really, really stupid, especially at the end when of course they turn on him. What the fuck? These are long-term villains. These aren't like wild cards.
Yeah, these aren't villains who end up being, okay, they kind of are anti-heroes. They got a heart of gold. No, they're pretty bad. They're pretty much ruthless killers when you come down to it. And he ended up helping because there was no other way, I think, that Zeb Wells can figure out to get Spider-Man involved because it's a gang war. He should be trying to stop this, not siding with people. And if he did do that, make it better. And when you talk about the jokes and riddles, at least you had the Joker and the Riddler there. Here we have Madame Mask. We end up having Silvermane. Like, these aren't obviously Tombstone. But the big play would have been Kingpin. He shows up and says, I'm out. He actually shows up to say, I don't want to be
Too
involved.
dangerous for me.
Yeah, I'm out. And so we're left with, I mean, does anybody care about the Heat? That the Heat showed up and Big Ben was on that map. I don't even know who the hell that is. I just sat there shaking my head.
Absolutely. So the next big takeaway I have from Spider-Man Gang War, it is action-packed for the most part. There are some dialogue-heavy scenes, but there are no like dialogue-heavy comic book issues itself. It didn't drag on like a lot of Marvel events have done as of late. So I will at least give them that. The action might have been pointless and they weren't really accomplishing anything. At least they were doing something.
Yeah, the issues went quick. They really did. And some of the side issues, some of the tie-ins, while they weren't good, they weren't really anything to tie. You had fun things like Luke Cage and a mecha. It just was ridiculous, though. But you did have action. That's one thing it did have.
Zeb Wells should have stolen this idea from The Warriors, the movie. We've talked about that one instead of stealing it from fucking Tom King. A villain like Tombstone is framed by Kingpin as the man that murdered like this big upstart gang leader. And they're going to send all the gangs in New York after Tombstone, and Spider-Man has to get him, to Coney Island, just like the original movie. Obviously, they want to do something different like that. Then Spider-Man has purpose. And then you actually have a reason for all this action to happen. And then you can put it in different settings and all this stuff, fighting different gangs that are trying to get out of the city. At least that's fun, and there's actually a reason for the action. So while I do say at least there's action, it's kind of pointless action for the most part.
And as you're saying, it would give Spider-Man a purpose. And that's one of the things when you sit there and you go through all these issues and at the end think, okay, what was the story here? What was the setup? What was the start? And it was basically, really it was Hammerhead messing around at the beginning. But really, Gang War was just gang war. There was nothing much to it. There was nothing else except, all these villains want to take over New York City. Okay, well, you need something a little more than that for Spider-Man to get involved, because if anything, we said he would have tried to stop that, but like he wouldn't want people to get killed. So maybe the idea of him trying to get Tombstone somewhere, trying to do that in the point where he doesn't like Tombstone. He's not helping him, but he doesn't want somebody to be killed. That's fine. Have a purpose more than, Randy Robertson got shot and here I am teaming up with a villain. It just, at the end, it fell apart.
And also at the end, we're not going to review the actual finale of the book. We're going to do that exclusively on the Patreon, with the Hot or Not podcast or whatever. But like in the end, when we get like all the action and everyone's fighting, there's so many characters, and a lot of times they kept showing them from the back. Yeah. I was like, which one is that one supposed to be? And even then, I guess the action wasn't compelling.
So funny you say that. When I reviewed it on our podcast, Rabble, who is like the one character that was involved with Miles, you just end up seeing her from the back. I'm like, what are you doing here? You're supposed to be pushing people. Oh my God, who's this character? Let's go. And it just is tough. It is tough when you have also in this final issue, you really just have characters show up to yell their names and then say one phrase and then leave. Yeah, basically it's like they look for their cue, they come running out, yell something and leave. And that's not showing me the tie-ins were worthwhile.
The fourth big takeaway I have from Spider-Man Gang War, and I hate to do this one because, Zeb Wells is never going to be an A-lister, but John Romita Jr. certainly has been an A-list comic book artist for a number of years. Right now, I'm doing a read-through of Kick-Ass, obviously written by Mark Miller, with 32 Flavors, and Nick Weiser also on the Patreon. He's just so noticeably past his prime at this point as an artist. He does do better on Spider-Man than he does on other characters. He doesn't look completely motivated, or at least didn't when he was doing Batman and stuff like that. I've seen him work on a few other Marvel characters since he's returned, and it does look worse there. But this does not do John Romita Jr. or his legacy or what he was capable of in his prime any justice at this point. It's almost, I don't want to say sad because I like John Romita Jr. I don't want him to retire and all that stuff, but it's noticeably not ready for prime time anymore.
And the problem is that, you're not going to go into this event saying, oh, my God, I got to see this John Romita Jr. art, which that would be cool, but he is past his prime. I mean, he is. But when you get this, the last issue I thought was an improvement, but before then, there were some really bad issues. And I think that one of the problems was Zeb Wells was just throwing a million characters at him. And he probably ran out of some time, had to hurry up. And that's not going to help somebody who's already, like we said, a little I hate to say it, too, because I really do like him. And I'm reading Kick-Ass right now as well. And it's awesome. It looks great.
Yes.
And it really gives that book part of the flavor and the storytelling by his art. But I don't know Zeb Wells is good enough to get that out of John Romita Jr. At this moment. I think that he was trying to keep up and trying to just get things done. And it just didn't look great.
Yeah, that's the saddest part, because like I said, you and I guess, are both reading Kick-Ass right now. And there's a lot of violence in that particular series. And there's a lot of close quarters combat and all that kind of stuff. And he makes it work. He makes it look very, very brutal. But then you get the issue here where you've got Tombstone and Kingpin fighting almost to the death, and it looks like they're kissing the whole time.
It looks like they're just making out battle going on. It's so weird. And there, you would hope that he still has it, and whether or not he died, I think there's a lot to do with the writing as well, that maybe he just wasn't even inspired. He gets this and like, okay, let me draw.
Who would be inspired? He could, he's the one reading the scripts. He knows that there's no reason for this event to exist either.
Yeah.
And what good well, we'll get to that point, but there's not a lot of great characters.
No.
In this fucking
not at all. Not at all. And like I said, when you end up going, there's so many of them, and we're cutting to this, that, and they're all just bad character. So what are you going to focus? What is going to be your wow moment in an issue when you're drawing it, because you're just kind of throwing it out there?
Well, this is an entire event void of wow moments, really.
Yeah, there
I think there was supposed to be a couple with the Madam Mask Isn't Dead review. I think was supposed to be a wow moment.
Yeah, that's not really a wow moment. And you even
the only thing that kind of was a wow moment, I'll take it back.
Okay.
When it did appear that Tombstone murdered his own daughter. That was kind of a wow moment. I was like, holy crap, I can't believe he brained her.
Yeah, it was funny you say that. When we did our podcast, we said, oh my God, I think he killed her. And people were like, there's no way he did. Like, people didn't even get that. I was like, man, he just crushed that back of that mask.
He like crushed her skull.
Like, holy crap. That was pretty crazy. But then again, like, where are the wow moments? Because it is tough to have a wow moment when nobody really, if I sat there and quizzed anybody watching this, what was that person's motivation? What was that? Even Madam Mask, she didn't want to take over New York. She wanted to see it burn, she said, and that's so generic. And yet we never see what it really meant to the city anyway. So it just ended up fizzling out.
Well, this will be my final takeaway of Spider-Man Gang War. The fifth thing that I can really take out of this event was the just cornucopia of fifth-rate villains. Madam Mask is not a big enough threat to be that compelling. For the most part, Tombstone isn't really a villain in here until the very end. It's more like his daughter Beetle that's the bigger villain. It's almost
Janice.
like her journey.
Yeah, she was trying to take over.
Kind of more about her. It's Count Nefaria, who's been really, really nerfed over the years and is not much of a threat. Silvermane is basically just a head at this point. There's the dude that shot Tombstone to begin with that no one ever remembers. It's like girl Doc Ock. It's not even the real Doc Ock. It's Electro. It's like it's girl Electro instead of the real Electro. It's all the dollar store variant versions of these villains that no one really cares about are taking up most of the screen time. And you're going, the She-Hulk would probably just fucking punt through all these guys. Why are we making a big deal about them? The biggest villain left of his own accord, Kingpin, you do get Tombstone at the end. And he does win. He defeats Spider-Man. But it's like at the very, very end of the book.
So you didn't have that. And you said you have Janice's daughter going through this and end up with the Syndicate, which are just those knockoff versions. And when you go, like, I know that Kingpin involved with the X-Men stuff and whatnot, but it's a shame because Kingpin versus Tombstone would have been, they shouldn't kiss, but maybe that would have been pretty cool. Like, you never had that idea. In each issue that you go to, you'd have that map. And I swear it would just randomly change because I didn't know what was going on. I'm like, okay, like really, like nothing.
I didn't notice much about it until the second to last issue, and it was like, oh, it's all Beetle and all Madam Mask now. When did that happen?
There was never any like upping the tension or progression of it, like, oh my God, I think this, and so by the end, I never saw anybody saying, oh my God, I hope this person wins, or I hope this, because nobody cared, because these were D-list, and then at the end, you show that they were when Tombstone just says, aha, I'm going to go, and the big idea of this was earlier he said, I'll never be the same. If I team up with Spider-Man, people will end up never trusting me. Well, what do you care? You're you're a villain that goes against these people. And then at the end, he's like, screw it. I'll just go after Spider-Man now.
But in theory, the big payoff should be a couple of villains that normally wouldn't fight each other finally squaring off in a big fight, right?
Yeah.
You get those dream never matches seen. That when you're fantasy booking your WrestleMania or whatever. You're like,
and where is that WrestleMania deal, like you said, where that, oh my God, that underdog you never thought was going to do anything became really kick-ass. Like, oh my, this is great. Never happened. You just end up with, the Undertaker run. Like every year. Like, okay, there you go.
Even Madam Mask doesn't fight one-on-one with Beetle.
No, and then gets taken out by getting her, gun gauntlet gooed up. I mean, it was a goof. It was just a goof.
Yeah, they needed more compelling villains. They needed to set up some big confrontations that would get people really, really excited. To build the tension, there was never any tension in there. And, it's probably a financial success because it was Amazing Spider-Man. And Amazing Spider-Man sells no matter what. But we know a lot of the tie-ins didn't do all that great. They certainly did better than Titans Beast World, which was a much bigger fiasco as far as sales than this one.
Yeah.
But at least Titans Beast World, for the most part, was fun.
Yeah, it was fun. And it didn't take itself too seriously. This tried to, and Zeb Wells can't write a regular run of Amazing Spider-Man, let alone an event.
Yeah, so I'm going to not recommend people invest in Spider-Man Gang War and save your $150 on this bad boy.
And the funny thing is, just as a final point for me, is that if you have the Marvel app, they actually threw a lot of this event early onto the app because I don't think, especially the, like you said, tie-ins, people were reading it. So oh my God, we better throw it out there. Maybe get some buzz for this final issue. And I don't think there's any buzz.
I do want to say this. If you're not a regular viewer of the Comics Aficionados, you might not hear Jim here on the channel all that much. And you might be going, I kind of like the cut of that guy's jib. It just so happens Jim and I have a podcast that goes up every single Thursday on my Patreon, where we talk about all the amazing comic book issues throughout the week from DC, Marvel, and indie comic books. We call it the Hot or Not podcast. And Jim and I also talk about the perils of being a dad in 2024.
Yes. An early dad and a late dad is what we have.
Absolutely. And there's a link in the video description if you would like to check that out. It is a ton of fun.